They hide the truth from us. What if the Cologne Cathedral is a forgotten power plant of a vanished civilization? Why are the ruins of dozens of fortresses scattered around while this giant has survived? What is the reason that temples are aligned along the Rhine with mathematical precision? How did the Golden Ark become a 300-kilogram capacitor? Who systematically removed the decor from it every century? And most importantly, why were the Western towers finished only by 1880, creating an illusion of the Middle Ages specifically for the emerging cameras? Subscribe to the channel. What follows will change your perception of Gothic cathedrals forever. Look into the book of Joshua, chapter 6. There is recorded an event that academic science stubbornly categorizes as a tale, a fiction, an artistic exaggeration. 7 priests with 7 trumpets circle around Jericho for 7 days straight. On the final day, they make a 7-fold circuit around the walls. Then they produce a loud sound, and the fortifications crumble to the foundation. Just like that. Under the influence of the acoustic wave. The official version calls it divine intervention, a miracle of celestial powers, a metaphor for spiritual strength. But pay attention to the numbers. 7 ministers, 7 instruments, 7 days, the 7th passage. These are not arbitrary values. These are specific parameters. Hertz, wave amplitude, resonance frequency. When an acoustic wave coincides with the natural vibrations of the material, resonant destruction occurs. The structure crumbles from within. Elementary physics, familiar to every builder. Each material has its own frequency of vibrations. For stone, this is usually between 2 and 15 Hz, precisely in the infrasound range. If you direct sound of this frequency with sufficient power at a stone wall, the molecular bonds will begin to loosen. Microscopic cracks expand. Blocks lose their adhesion. The wall collapses like a house of cards. Modern engineers know about this effect. That is why it is prohibited to march in step on bridges. The synchronized step can resonate with the bridge's structure and destroy it. That is why an opera singer is able to break a crystal glass with her voice. She hits the resonant frequency of the glass. The same physics applies. Only in the case of Jericho, the scale was different. And if acoustics can destroy stone masonry, then it can also work the masonry. Lift it into the air, give it shape, move it over distances. There are documentary evidence of Tibetan monks levitating multi-ton boulders with the help of pipes and drums. There are experiments with acoustic levitation in modern laboratories. Physics works. The only question is the power and accuracy of tuning the frequency. And now, mentally transport yourself to Germany, the Rhine Valley. Dozens of medieval fortifications have turned into ruins. Not simply partially dismantled, they have been erased from the face of the earth. As if a special team methodically went through the region tasked with eliminating every structure down to the last stone. Take the map of the Rhine region. The Rheinfels Castle was once the largest fortress on the Rhine, covering an area of more than 5 hectares. Now it is in ruins. The Rheinstein Castle is in ruins. The Stolzenfels Castle is in ruins, partially restored in the 19th century as a romantic decoration for the Prussian king. The Marksburg Castle is the only relatively intact one in this part of the Rhine, but it too was carefully rebuilt in the 19th century. The Katz Castle, the Maus Castle, the Liebenstein Castle, the Sterenberg Castle, Everywhere the same picture. The walls are destroyed to their foundations. The towers are truncated. The foundations are exposed. Only in the section of the Rhine between Mainz and Koblenz, a distance of about 80 kilometers, there are more than 40 ruined castles. 40 in one river section. The average density is one castle every 2 kilometers of coastline. And all of them were turned into ruins in roughly the same historical period, the late 17th, early 18th century. Official historiography explains this by military actions, long sieges, and devastations. Louis XIV's French troops in 1689 and 1690 allegedly methodically destroyed the castles of the Palatinate and the Rhine region, the scorched earth policy, so that the enemy could not use the fortresses in future conflicts. Stop for a second and realize the scale of such an operation. A wall width of 3 to 5 meters. Each element weighs from 1 to 3 tons. The height of the towers reaches 30–40 meters, comparable to a modern 12-story building. The foundations go deep into the rock. Walls up to 7 meters thick at the base. All of this needs to be dismantled, element by element, stone by stone. Let's take a specific example. The Rheinfels Castle had walls stretching over 700 meters, up to 6 meters thick, and towers up to 40 meters high. To dismantle such a fortress by hand, hundreds of workers, years of labor, and tons of provisions are needed. And now the context. The army has just stormed the fortress. They have lost people. They have used up supplies. The soldiers are exhausted. Winter is near. And now the order. Stay. Dismantle the walls for years. Why? So that the peasants do not take a stone? Absurd. The absurdity is obvious. The building stone was everywhere. The Rhine region abounds with limestone outcrops, open quarries on every hill. Dragging multi-ton blocks down the slope without roads and mechanisms is a titanic effort for nothing. A peasant could find a boulder in the field, break it on the spot, and obtain material for any construction. Dismantling locks is ineffective. The costs are colossal. The benefit is zero. However, the values, copper, iron, lead roofing, wooden beams, they were truly worth taking out. But stonemasonry? It is easier to leave it. The logic collapses. However, in the midst of this cemetery of Gothic architecture stands one object, whole, undamaged. Cologne Cathedral. Height 157 meters, 300,000 tons of stone mass. Total area about 9,000 square meters. Length 144 meters. Width 86 meters. 2 towers on the western facade rise above the city like giant antennas. Why did it remain unharmed when everything around turned to rubble? Perhaps it was not attempted to be destroyed? Perhaps it was occupied? Converted? Transformed from what it originally was into what it demonstrates today. A Christian temple, a cultural object, a landmark? Take a geographical map of Germany from the 18th century. Mark on it all the destroyed Gothic castles and temples. Now compare this map with the map of Great Tartaria from 1716, published in Amsterdam by the cartographer Nicolaas Whitson. The coincidence of the territories is frighteningly precise. All major Gothic structures are located exactly where the lands of Grand Tartaria are marked on ancient maps. The western borders of the empire ran along the Rhine River, and it is along this line that the maximum density of the destruction of tall buildings is concentrated. Cologne is exactly on the border divide, a border node, a strategic center. Pay attention to the specifics of the destruction. It is precisely the vertical structures that have been destroyed. Spires, towers, everything that stretched upwards, everything that exceeded the height of 30–40 meters. Low buildings, churches, town halls, residential houses, often remained intact or were only slightly damaged. This does not resemble classic military actions. In a conventional war, the destruction is chaotic. Cannonballs fly to where the cannons are aimed. Walls are breached at points of least resistance. But here the picture is different. This resembles the dismantling of a technical system, as if someone deliberately cut the transmitting antennas, severing the network from its power source. A modern equivalent is the destruction of cellular towers during a military conflict. Low buildings are left untouched, but anything that rises up and can transmit or receive is subject to elimination. But what network was being destroyed in the 17th century? What connected all these Gothic cathedrals? Religious affiliation? Architectural style? Or something deeper? To find the answer, let us go beneath the surface of the earth. Beneath the Cologne Cathedral lies an extensive system of underground chambers. The official version describes this as an archaeological zone with remnants of Roman and early Christian structures. The area of the underground space exceeds 4,000 square meters. The depth goes down 10, 12, in places up to 15 meters below the modern ground level. This is not a simple basement. It is a real, multi-level underground complex. Guides show tourists picturesque stories. A 5th century baptistry with 8 corners and curved faces. The octagon is a classic shape for baptistries of that period. The cross-shaped rooms are decorated with mosaic panels, fragments of a Roman aqueduct, a canopy over the baptismal font, the burial of a woman and an 8-year-old child, attributed to the Merovingian dynasty based on the shape of the skulls and the arrangement of the graves. Valuable artifacts in the grave, gold jewelry, glass vessels, amber beads, reportedly testify to the high status of these individuals. All of this, according to historians, proves that several generations of temples were consecutively built at this location. Each new one surpassed its predecessor in scale. A language without bones. One can come up with and voice any version. One can attribute findings to any period and any culture. But when you start analyzing the material, studying the masonry, looking at the technology, the questions arise significantly more than the explanations. Take a closer look at the details. In the construction of these so-called Roman ruins, red burned brick is used, standardized in size, perfectly rectangular. Rome built with natural stone, marble for prestigious buildings, tuff for mass construction, travertine for foundations. Brick was used in the Roman Empire, but limited and through different technologies. Roman brick was flat, more like a tile. It was laid on thick layers of mortar. Here, the brickwork is executed using a technology that spread in Europe not earlier than the 12th century, and massively in the 14th century. Thin joints, uniform bonding, perfect geometry. Bricks of the same size, fired at high temperatures. Moreover, this is not a restoration. Archaeologists insist that this is the original construction of the 5th century. How did the Romans of the 5th century produce standardized red bricks using 14th century technology? The question remains open. The arch vaults of the underground halls were made using a method that appeared significantly later than the 5th century. Pointed arches, ribbed vaults, flying buttress systems. All these are elements of Gothic architecture, which developed in the 12th and 13th centuries. Roman arches were built according to different principles: semicircular, resting on massive walls. But here we see precisely Gothic solutions, which are being presented to us as Roman constructions of the 5th century. It is even more curious that the walls of these underground structures continue downward for many dozens of meters. What is shown to tourists is only the upper part, cleared by archaeologists. The real depth has not been uncovered, perhaps intentionally. Drilling conducted in the 1970s showed that the foundation of the cathedral rests on structures that go deeper than 20 meters. If excavations continue, a 5 to 7 story underground structure will be discovered beneath the cathedral. And now think logically. The cathedral has a mass of 300,000 tons. The pressure on the ground is colossal. How can such a massive structure be installed on fragments of some ancient temples built 1,500 years ago from brick and gravel? This is engineering absurdity. Any architect will tell you, the foundation for such a load must be monolithic, solid, designed for a specific mass. The foundation must be calculated with a safety margin of at least 3 times. This means that the underground part must be able to withstand a load of up to 1 million tons. Therefore, everything located beneath the cathedral, as well as the cathedral itself, is a single system. They were simply artificially divided over time. The lower levels were declared ancient ruins from different eras. The upper levels were called a medieval temple, built over centuries. Although in reality, these are different floors of one gigantic structure, designed and built as a single complex. Under the cathedral are not temple ruins. Under the cathedral are technical floors, communication systems, resonance chambers, energy equipment. All this is buried under clay at a depth of 8 to 12 meters. A uniform layer, not household waste, not organic waste, not cultural layers. Purest clay, without impurities of construction rubble, without ceramics, without animal bones, just clay. Where did it come from in the stone city? Cologne is built of stone. Limestone blocks for the walls, granite slabs for paving, slate plates for roofing. Clay is a sedimentary rock, the result of soil erosion. For such a quantity of homogeneous clay to form, a cataclysm of planetary scale was required. The archives of Cologne contain documents about strange finds during construction in the 19th century. Workers would come across sealed chambers at a depth of 10-12 meters. Inside, emptiness. Air. As if the rooms had been sealed and covered in a single day. No signs of gradual filling, no debris. Just clean clay on top and empty spaces beneath it. Now let's go up. In the cathedral is the golden ark of the 3 Magi. The official history claims this is a sarcophagus that holds the relics of the 3 Eastern kings who came to worship the infant Christ 2,000 years ago. The length of the ark is 220 centimeters. The height is 153 centimeters. The width is 110 centimeters. Its weight is about 300 kilograms.
It is almost entirely covered in gold. The surface is adorned with precious stones, emeralds, sapphires, rubies, enamel inlays, carved figures made of gilded silver. We are told a beautiful legend. The relics of the Magi were first kept in Persia, in the city of Sava. Then Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, transported them to Constantinople in the 4th century. From there, the relics made their way to Milan in the 6th century. In 1162, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa captured Milan, confiscated the relic, and handed it over to Cologne Archbishop Reinhold von Dassel. He brought the relics to Cologne. There, a golden reliquary was specially made for them. The work was carried out from 1180 to 1230. Half a century to create the box. Half a century. Think about it. 50 years. 2 generations of craftsmen created a box measuring 2 meters by 1.5 meters. Even if we assume that the work was done intermittently, that craftsmen died and were replaced by new ones, that there were technical difficulties, 50 years is absurdly long for a product of such size. By comparison, the entire cathedral was allegedly built over 189 years of the first stage of construction. It turns out that a quarter of the time for the construction of the entire building, which is 157 meters tall, was spent on the ark.
The logic is absent. But the main mystery is not in the time of creation. The mystery is in the construction. The ark is made in the form of a basilica, a long rectangular base, a gable roof. At the ends, there are 2 pediments decorated with carved figures and scenes. This is not an accidental shape. It is a resonator, an acoustic chamber. Inside the ark is a cavity. The walls are thick, multi-layered. Gold covers the outer surface with a thickness of about 1 millimeter. But under the gold is an oak base with a thickness of 5 to 7 centimeters. And under the wood, between the wooden base and the gold leaf, there are thin metal plates made of copper or silver. A layered structure, a sandwich of conductor, dielectric, and conductor. Gold conducts electricity better than all known materials except for silver. It does not oxidize. It does not change its properties over time. It is resistant to corrosion. Wood is a dielectric, an insulator. The metal plates under the wood are capacitor plates. A capacitor is a device for storing electrical charge. 2 conductors separated by an insulator. A classic circuit familiar to every electrical engineer. And this construction weighs 300 kilograms. 300 kilograms of gold, wood, and metal in the shape of a basilica. Not a coincidence. Not an ornament. Not a sarcophagus. A device. A component of a system. An energy accumulator. A resonator. A converter. The purpose is unknown, but the shape and materials unambiguously indicate a technical function. And another fact that tour guides remain silent about. The decor of the ark was systematically changed over the centuries. Figures were removed from it, elements were replaced, and the composition was reworked. In the 13th century, it had 1 set of images. In the 15th, it had another. In the 17th, it had a third. In the 18th, another rework took place. Inventory descriptions record these changes. Why? If this is a relic, why is it constantly being altered? Christian relics are usually preserved intact. Any change is considered sacrilege. But here, every century something is removed and something is added. Maybe they removed not the decor, but specific technical elements. Sensors, Conductors? Activators? Perhaps the system was gradually dismantled. First, one component was removed. A century later, another. By the 19th century, only the form remained from the functional part, while everything else was replaced with religious symbolism. The Cologne Cathedral in old photographs looks different than today. There exists a photograph from 1855, one of the oldest daguerreotypes of European cities. It clearly shows the eastern part of the cathedral is completed. The central nave is covered with a roof. The side naves are enclosed. But the western facade ends at the level of the base of the towers. The towers are missing. They simply do not exist. In their place, stumps of walls approximately 20 meters high stick out. Construction scaffolding, unfinished structures, emptiness where today 100-meter spires rise. According to the official version, the construction of the cathedral was interrupted in 1437 and resumed only in 1842. The photograph was taken in 1855. Therefore, at the time of shooting, 13 years of resumed work had passed. During this time, only the foundation of the towers was built. The entire western facade with 2 towers was completed by 1880. In total, 38 years. Now compare with the official chronology of the entire cathedral. The first stage of construction allegedly lasted from 1248 to 1437. 189 years of continuous work. During this period, the choir, transept, and part of the nave were built. Then, as we are informed, a halt occurred. For 405 years, the cathedral stood unfinished. Just like that. Without a roof over part of the structures. Without protection. Without restoration. For over 4 centuries, no one touched it, dismantled it for building materials, removed the valuable finishes, or plundered the interior decoration. During the Reformation, when cathedrals were being destroyed throughout Europe, Cologne Cathedral stood open and was not looted. Amazing, isn't it? And then, in the 19th century, those very marvelous medieval plans are suddenly discovered, allegedly preserved since the Middle Ages. And in 38 years, they erect the western facade with 2 towers, the most complex, the highest, the most detailed part of the whole ensemble. In 38 years, they completed more work than in 189 years of the first phase. The arithmetic does not add up. The history does not connect. The logic has evaporated. Moreover, pay attention to the style of execution. The western facade looks ideally Gothic. Open-work carvings, pointed arches, rosettes, spires, gargoyles. Everything is executed with exquisite precision, not the slightest differences from the eastern part, which was supposedly built in the 13th century. How is this possible? Construction technologies changed radically over 400 years. The tools became different. The masters lost the skills of Gothic carving. Gothic went out of fashion, replaced by the Renaissance, Baroque, Classicism. Yet in the 19th century, masters suddenly emerged who achieved a perfect imitation of the 13th century. Even modern expertise cannot distinguish parts built in different eras. Convenient, isn't it? In fact, these are masterpieces of engineering thought. The energy infrastructure of Great Tartary. An empire that controlled a significant part of the Eurasian continent until the 18th century. The map of Gothic cathedrals coincides with the borders of Grand Tartary on the maps of the 18th century. The western border ran along the Rhine. Cologne was a border city, the farthest outpost in the west. Look at the western towers of the cathedral from a different angle. Two identically symmetrical structures. The height of each is 157 meters. The distance between their centers is approximately 60 meters. These are not arbitrary values. 60 meters is half the wavelength of infrasound at a frequency of about 2.5 hertz. The two towers at such a distance form a dipole, a directional antenna, a transmitter and receiver simultaneously. The principle of operation is similar to modern dipole antennas, but operating in the acoustic range. The shape of the towers is a narrow vertical cone with a lace-like structure. Stone carving creates a lattice structure, thousands of holes, arches, passages. Externally, this looks like decoration, but from a physics perspective, this is a waveguide device. The acoustic wave moves from the bottom to the top through the internal channel of the tower, simultaneously resonating with the lattice structure of the walls. The wave is concentrated, amplified by multiple reflections, and focused towards the top. At the top of each tower is a sharp spire about 9 meters tall. On the spire is a metallic cross with gilding. The cross is 4 meters 20 centimeters high. Gold is an ideal conductor of electricity, not prone to oxidation. The shape of the cross is a classic T-shaped antenna with capacitive loading. The horizontal crossbar serves as the radiating element. The vertical rod is the feeding conductor. The physics of antennas operates the same for electromagnetic waves and for acoustic oscillations. Inside the towers, massive bells are suspended at different levels. Officially, to call the faithful to worship. The largest bell, Peter, weighs 24 tons. Its diameter is 3 meters 22 centimeters. It is one of the largest functioning bells in the world. However, historical chronicles record strange prohibitions on bell ringing. Periods when the bells were silent for decades. So why were they installed at all? Only for rare celebrations? It doesn't make sense. The real purpose of the bell in such a system is a resonator, a massive metallic object of a certain shape and mass, suspended in a narrow vertical channel. When the walls of the tower begin to vibrate at a certain frequency, the bell enters resonance. Its own frequency coincides with the vibration frequency of the structure. The bell amplifies the oscillations by tens of times. It creates a standing wave inside the tower. The energy is accumulated, concentrated, and directed out through the spire in the form of a directed acoustic beam. These towers were destroyed during the cataclysm of the 18th century. They were the highest and most vulnerable elements of the structure. The shock wave from the explosions or powerful seismic vibrations brought them down first. Just as during earthquakes, tall, narrow buildings collapse first. This is why there are no towers in the photograph from 1855. They were not completed in the Middle Ages. They were simply destroyed in the 18th century. In the 19th century, they restored the form. They imitated the style. They reproduced the appearance based on the surviving descriptions and engravings. But they did not restore the function, because they did not understand it. For the 19th century, these were simply tall towers for beauty and Christian symbolism. The engineers of that time did not know about the resonant properties of the structure. They recreated a dead shell without a filling. When the war against Tartaria began in the late 18th century, this system was the first to be destroyed. Energy infrastructure is always a priority target. Without energy, the empire weakens. Production stops. Transportation is paralyzed. Communication is interrupted. Without communication, centralized control is impossible. The army cannot coordinate actions. Provinces begin to act independently. The empire disintegrates into fragments. Without protection, the territories become vulnerable. The defensive barriers created by the network of resonator cathedrals disappear. The borders open for invasion. Take a map of the Rhine region and mark all the major Gothic cathedrals on it. From Cologne to Aachen Cathedral is 68 kilometers in a straight line. From Aachen to Maastricht is 71 kilometers. From Maastricht to the cathedral in Brussels is 74 kilometers. From Cologne south to Bonn is about 30 kilometers. But further to Koblenz, there is another cathedral. The distance from Bonn is about 60 kilometers. The average distance between major Gothic temples is 70 kilometers, with a margin of plus or minus 10 kilometers. This is not a coincidence. It is an exact calculation. If Gothic cathedrals generated infrasound at a frequency of 2 to 3 Hz, then 70 kilometers is exactly half the wavelength for that frequency. The speed of sound in air is 340 meters per second. For a frequency of 2 Hz, the wavelength is 170 meters. No, that's a mistake. The speed is 340 meters per second. Divided by the frequency of 2 Hz gives us 170 meters. No, that's not it either. Wait. For infrasound at a frequency of 2 Hz, the wavelength is equal to 340 divided by 2, which gives 170 meters. But we are talking about 70 kilometers. This means the waves were not propagating through air, but through the ground. Seismic waves. Or through water. The Rhine River acted as a conductor. Water excellently conducts low-frequency acoustic vibrations. The attenuation coefficient of infrasound in water is hundreds of times lower than in air. The wave propagates over vast distances, almost without losses. It is amplified by the current of the river. It is directed by the riverbed. The temples were built along the Rhine, not by chance. They formed a chain, an energy highway. Each cathedral is a node of the network, a receiver and a transmitter at the same time, an information channel, a protective barrier, everything at once. Around each cathedral were star-shaped fortresses. The one in Cologne was demolished in 1853. Officially, it interfered with the city's development. But the star shape has never been optimal for defense. Complex geometry creates dead zones and requires more troops. However, it is perfect for wave physics. A star creates standing waves, focusing energy from the perimeter to the center, to the cathedral. The system worked simply. The cathedral generated acoustics, the fortress focused energy. The river transmitted vibrations to the next node. The chain of temples along the Rhine is not a tradition. It is an engineering network for wireless transmission of energy and information over hundreds of kilometers. What was transmitted? 3 hypotheses. Information. An acoustic telegraph encoding signals by frequency and amplitude. Energy. Electricity through the piezoelectric effect of quartz in granite when the cathedral vibrates. Climate. Infrasound affects atmospheric processes, pressure, movement of air masses, perhaps all at once. The Cologne Cathedral survived because it was captured first. It was not blown up in time. The equipment was neutralized, disconnected, and seized. Possibly those elements of the ark that were removed every century. It was repurposed into a Christian temple. It was left as a trophy. The other temples were destroyed or turned into ruins. The system was disabled. Tartaria lost its infrastructure. Communication was interrupted. Energy disappeared. The defense fell. The empire did not lose the war. It was drained from within. First, the technologies were destroyed. Then the memory of their existence was erased. In the 19th century, a total cleansing of traces began. History was rewritten. A legend was created about the Dark Middle Ages, when supposedly primitive methods were used for centuries to build. Drawings showing the true purpose of the constructions were forged or destroyed. The construction of the towers of the Cologne Cathedral was simulated specifically for the newly appeared cameras, so that future generations would see evidence of prolonged construction. The symbolism on artifacts was altered. Everything that indicated the true creators was removed. Technical elements were replaced with religious ones. Resonators were declared bells for prayer. Antennas were declared spires for aesthetics. The operation was carried out meticulously. The instructions were burned. The blueprints were destroyed. The engineers were eliminated or silenced. Subsequent generations received only the shell without content. Tourists today pay for entrance tickets, photograph the stained glass, listen to stories about pious builders. Guides show the altars and talk about the saints. No one explains why there are underground chambers 20 meters deep in a Christian temple. No one questions why the walls contain quartz inclusions that generate piezoelectricity when vibrated. No one studies the acoustic properties of the vaults that form directional resonators. The Cologne Cathedral is silent. It was forced to be silent almost 300 years ago. It was disconnected. It was neutralized. It was turned into a religious symbol. But the shape remained. The proportions remained. The location relative to the river and other cathedrals remained. Physics did not disappear anywhere. Mathematics has not changed over the centuries. 70 kilometers between the cathedrals is still the optimal distance for a resonant network in the infrasound range. The Golden Ark, weighing 300 kilograms, is still a capacitor with a multi-layer structure of conductor-dielectric conductor. The spires, 157 meters tall, with metal crosses on top, are still waveguide antennas. The stone remembers. The geometry has survived, even if we, humans, have forgotten the purpose. Acoustics destroyed the walls of Jericho 2,000 years ago. Acoustics built Cologne Cathedral and thousands of similar structures across Eurasia. Sound was a weapon and the main instrument of the civilization we call Tartaria. They possessed technologies that today seem fantastic or magical to us. Construction of megaliths, wireless energy transmission, planetary communication system, weather control. All of this functioned without electrical wires, without radio waves, without computers. Only stone, water, metal, and precise knowledge of the physics of resonance. The technology is lost, but the evidence remains. The spires still reach for the sky at a calculated angle. The distance between the towers maintains accuracy to within a meter. The thickness of the walls corresponds to that necessary for an acoustic waveguide. The crypt goes to a depth exceeding the height of the above-ground part in some sections. This is not a temple with a basement. This is an iceberg, where the visible part is less than the hidden. Cologne Cathedral is not a monument of piety. It is the last undestroyed knot of a ruined network, a witness of the technocratic empire which has been erased from history textbooks. The traces have been cleared, but the physical parameters remain unchanged. Geometry does not lie. The distances are recorded on the ground, and sooner or later someone will connect this data. They will find the resonant frequency. They will supply voltage to the right nodes, and the system will awaken after 300 years of silence. I do not claim that everything is exactly as described here. I am not selling you absolute truth. I do not demand blind faith in my words. My task is different: to lay before you specific facts that usually remain behind the scenes of official tours and history textbooks. Measured dimensions of buildings, recorded distances between cathedrals, documented discrepancies in the official chronology of construction, oddities of archaeological findings that do not fit into the commonly accepted version, technical characteristics of structures that find no explanation. All of this exists objectively, regardless of how we interpret it. The height of the towers has been measured with geodetic instruments, 157 meters. The distance to Aachen has been verified on maps, 68 kilometers. The mass of the Golden Ark has been weighed and documented, 300 kilograms. A photograph from 1855 is stored in archives and available for study. The destroyed castles can be visited in person to witness the scale of the destruction. This is not theories and assumptions. These are measurable quantities. Ideology will not change the readings of devices. Political conjuncture will not move cities on the map. Academic titles will not make the physics of resonance work differently. I am simply connecting the dots that are visible. I point out the discrepancies that official historians ignore. Why was more built in 38 years of the 19th century than in 189 years of the Middle Ages? Why does the photograph from 1855 show an absence of towers if they were supposedly started to be built in the 13th century? Why does the Golden Ark have a layered structure of metal dielectric metal, characteristic of capacitors? There are no clear answers to these questions in textbooks. What to do with this information is up to you to decide. Look broader. Go beyond school programs. Ask uncomfortable questions to historians and archaeologists. Do not take either my words or the statements of academics at face value. Demand evidence. Compare sources. Look for contradictions. Trust measurements, not authorities. Truth is not served ready on a platter. It is not issued with the stamp of government approval. It is hidden in technical parameters that have been forgotten to explain, in sizes that have ceased to be measured, in distances that have stopped being noticed. One unanswered question is enough, and the official version cracks. 10 questions, and an entire chapter of the textbook collapses. 100 questions, and it is necessary to rewrite all of history. Subscribe to the channel. Activate notifications. New investigations into architectural anomalies are ahead. We will seek physical evidence, compare documents, ask questions to specialists who prefer to remain silent. Study what science sidesteps, citing a lack of data in the presence of abundant facts. Because evidence surrounds us everywhere, imprinted in the architecture of cities, recorded in the planning of territories, coded in the proportions of buildings. All it takes is the desire to see